Okay, so next we're going to have Gul Agha, and let me tell you a little bit about him. He is a well-known computer scientist and professor. He is prestigious. He has over 150 publications and has written about his travels and experiences in Sindh and is an expert. Okay. And so he's written about his experiences and travels in Sindh and has much to say and can offer a lot of insight. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gul Agha.
So, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. In the past years, I've sort of presented slides of Sindh and so on. This year, I was asked to sort of just give an extempore presentation about my experiences. I've been involved for the last almost 30 years now for human rights in Sindh through various organizations and various activities. And it's nice to see it coming to fruition in SAPAC, increasing awareness. We have huge problems which have only increased, unfortunately, over the last 30 years, rather than gotten better. That seems to be the case since the last 60 years, actually, since the creation of Pakistan, unfortunately. The situation is quite dire. As you know, the last election was severely manipulated. Hundreds of secular candidates were attacked and assassinated. There were a large number of assassinations, particularly in the Pakhtunkhwa province, resulting in essentially the disenfranchisement of a lot of people. And to just give you an idea of what kind of government, so we've always had these security agencies which really are running a shadow government. And people said, well, you have a government that's the democratic government that was dominated by Sindhis in the last 5 years. The reality was that they, in fact, did not allow that government to function. For example, the president, who was from Sindh, said we ought to have a trade treaty with India. And he started negotiations on a trade treaty and wanted to have free trade, which makes perfect sense. If you look at the United States, the largest trading partner is Canada, not China. Next in line is Mexico, almost on par with the Chinese. Considering the size of Mexico and the size of the Chinese economy, you can sort of see the difference. And now you can just imagine how large a trading partner the US is for Canada, so it makes perfect sense. But we got the Mumbai attacks as a result from the security agencies to kill off any negotiations on the free trade agreement, any talk of the free trade agreement. The president declared that there should be a no first strike policy on nuclear weapons. It should be our stated policy. And he was removed from the National Security Council. He was no longer allowed to be on it. The security agencies insisted. He asked that the ISI, which is the intelligence agency, be brought under the command of the Interior Ministry, and he was refused. He was rejected. It's no law. They removed the power that he had to appoint judges. So this was sort of the situation in Pakistan. Only 4 of the 19 High Court judges in Sindh are Sindhi. The rest are non-Sindhi speaking. So even though there was a government that was elected that after the killing of Benazir Bhutto, they felt obliged not to manipulate the elections as much as they did this time. They rendered the government toothless and powerless, even when they were democratically elected and were putting forward rational policies. Today, in fact, just to see what kind of situation in government we have, the Punjab government announced, as they have been doing for the last few years, because it's been in the hands of the opposition, a 61 million rupee grant to an organization called Jamaat-e-Dawa. It's a grant from the government. Now, Jamaat-e-Dawa is an organization that was banned by the United Nations. Its head, Hafiz Saeed, is somebody who's wanted for the terrorist attacks in Mumbai. And the government justifies this by saying, well, we banned it. The UN banned it, so we banned it. A reporter showed up just a couple of years ago, 2 years after the ban was announced, at the headquarters of this organization, who are now getting a grant from the government. And Hafiz Saeed, who's a wanted terrorist, goes around making speeches quite freely. There was no sign of any government officials from the Pakistan government. And the people there said, no, we don't see them. They come and they give us money, and that's their only role. So now this terrorist outfit, which did not target the Pakistan Muslim League, which is now coming in power, they targeted the Awami National League, the People's Party candidates, all the secular parties. They have been paid for the last several years by the government with no supervision, no control, just officially. They're saying, well, we banned them and they're running charities, quote unquote. What are the charities? Well, there are these madrasas. The madrasas are considered charities, and the government is officially giving them money as a response to a ban from the United Nations. The Security Council declaring them as a terrorist outfit said, okay, we ban them and we take them over and they'll be run by the government, but exactly the same people running these organizations. And then the reporter was hushed away. This was in a Pakistani newspaper, and then the story is never covered again. If you look at the number of journalists killed in Pakistan, it's not too surprising. It has got the highest mortality rate for journalists, even beyond Syria and Afghanistan. It's the most dangerous country. It was on the top of the list of the PFUJ, which is the Society to Protect Journalists. So these are the conditions under which the country is functioning. There is, the Congressman Maloney mentioned the rights of women. There is a council called for Islamic Jurisprudence. They basically give rulings that the courts are supposed to obey. Most recently, the council gave a ruling saying that DNA evidence could not be used in rape trials. That it could not be a primary evidence, you could not build a case around the DNA, and of course their reasoning is that it's not mentioned in the Sharia. Well, 1400 years ago, it seems that they didn't know about DNA evidence. The only assembly which went immediately, and again will be toothless because they have no control over the judges, they have no control over the courts. The only assembly that passed a unanimous resolution condemning it is the Sindh Assembly. The sort of people that we have now in government, there is a party which was the beneficiary of all the assassinations in Pakhtunkhwa, which was Imran Khan's party, Tehreek-e-Istiqlal. Their member of National Assembly demanded that the assassins of the Punjab governor, so there was Governor Tasir, who was a liberal governor appointed by President Zardari to the province of Punjab, and he was assassinated by religious fanatics in the Punjab. The only assembly that condemned that again was the Sindh Assembly. The Punjab Assembly did not even pass a resolution of condolence. And in fact, the degree of fundamentalism of the areas from which the military and the security apparatus of Pakistan comes is such that even the lawyers from that region said that if anyone defends the murderer, the assassins of the governor, who did it in broad daylight, then that person should be also assassinated. This is the Lawyers Bar Association. That they would be expelled from the Bar Association and so on. And Sindh Assembly was the only one that condemned it. Now, a member of the National Assembly who won from Imran Khan's party has demanded that the assassins of Governor Tasir be released. They should just be let go because they have killed. Now, what was the crime of Governor Tasir? The Governor of Tasir's crime was that he met a young woman, a 13-year-old Christian woman, who had been accused of blasphemy and was being tried, which is a capital offense, was being tried for the death penalty. And it turned out that she's illiterate and she was supposed to have blasphemed by some piece of paper that were written Arabic that were allegedly a piece of Quran, and she didn't know what it was. She was working as a cleaning person, child labor. And the governor, went and met her in prison, and he was assassinated as a result. But of course, there may be fanatics anywhere. The fact is that not only was he assassinated, the assembly of the province that he's the governor of refused to issue a condemnation, refused to issue condolences. And now the elected members of the National Assembly of the party that will be leading in the Pashtun area, where there was a campaign of assassinations against the secular party of Awami National Party, which has a very long secular history, by the way. They were pacifists in resisting the British. Their leader, Ghaffar Khan, was called Father Bacha Khan, very well respected, always won the elections. After the creation of Pakistan, they kept him in prison and they kept him out of elections. Well, there was a campaign of assassinations, and as I mentioned, about 700 people were assassinated, including all their candidates. So they could not hold a rally, they could not campaign, they could not do anything in the last election. They have been replaced by Imran Khan's party, which has been backed by the intelligence agencies, and their MNA was the one demanding that all charges be dropped against the assassins of this previous governor. So these are the sort of conditions in the country, and the only island of sanity that's left is in the province of Sindh, which is the rural areas are poverty-stricken and so on. But their representatives currently are still electing the most liberal candidates, the ones who immediately respond by saying no, DNA evidence must be considered. Unfortunately, they're powerless. As I mentioned, the courts are not controlled by them. They cannot appoint people to the courts, and they have very little authority. Their resolutions are often ignored. But they're still at the forefront, and they represent a culture, regardless of how cautious they are or how compromised they might be in many ways. They represent a culture that is the most liberal culture in Pakistan, that is the most tolerant, it's the most concerned about minority rights, concerned about the rights of women, and we really need to foster that. So I'd like to welcome Congressman Sherman. Glad to see you. And those were sort of my brief remarks as background, and I think we can proceed further. Thank you.